Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Carey Moore. Welcome to this hour's discussion. I'm the Senior Sustainability Analyst at Integrated Eco Strategy and a seasoned veteran of the Living Building Challenge's Materials Petal. Just in case we have any newcomers attending today, Living Building Challenge is a green building certification program and sustainable design framework that uses a metaphor of a flower because ideally, the built environment should function as cleanly and efficiently as a flower. Buildings attaining the full living designation generate more energy than they use, capture and treat all water on site, and are constructed using healthy materials that meet the Red List and other criteria. Today I'll be moderating the discussion. Our focus is the Materials Petal, but the information can be applied to make any project healthier. While we can't address your questions live, we are participating in today's chat, so please post your questions there. Before I introduce the panelists, please introduce yourself in the chat. Who are you? What is your practice area? And have you done an LBC project or investigated a building product to understand its chemistry and other attributes? And as an additional question, what was that first building product you tackled? So today's panelists include my colleague Charlie Stevenson. Charlie founded IES in 2010 and was an early adherent to the holistic values of LBC and a pioneer in assisting project teams in creating living buildings. For the last decade, IES has channeled project aspirations into a process to certify, with projects ranging from 1,000 square feet to over 500,000 square feet, including the Science and Engineering Center at Harvard, Williams College's Class of '66 Environmental Center, Hampshire College's R.W. Kern Center, the Hitchcock Center for the Environment, and the Yale Divinity School Living Village Master Plan. To facilitate compliance, and I'd argue to sustain the health and happiness of his employees, Charlie took the feedback from early Materials Petal explorers to create space for the development of Red to Green, a proprietary comprehensive software platform for building material evaluation, selection, and management. Today's session is sponsored by Red to Green with the intent to shine the spotlight on the work of just a few of our project partners to show what is possible when committed people join together to achieve common goals. So joining us today is Lana Rarick, a champion of low-impact, healthy materials, not just as a sustainable specifier and designer at CGF, but guiding healthier material work as a board member at the Health Product Declaration Collaborative and the AIA National Materials Knowledge Working Group that was responsible for the recently revamped AIA Materials Pledge. Lana is CGF's sustainability lead on CalSTRS, a project that's pursuing LEED, WELL, and LBC Materials Petal certification. She's also steering ZGF's materials efforts on the Portland PAE Living Building and helps teams on both projects navigate Red List questions and complexities. Next is Dustin Jones, a senior associate at Methuen whose experience as a timber framer is just one reason he's fond of utilizing natural materials in his work. He is particularly passionate about projects with a mission in education that have a strong connection to the places they're in, as exemplified by Methuen's Sustainability Treehouse project in West Virginia. While that project used LBC to help inform their design process, his current work leading Methuen's renovation of their Pier 56 location puts him at the center of achieving the Materials Petal and Core certification. Our final panelist is Mike Evans, the Associate Director of the Zilka Center for Environmental Initiatives at Williams College, which is based in the campus's first LBC certified project. So he's a feature of the frequent tours that become a hallmark of many living buildings. Mike focuses on the college's sustainable operations, which includes strategic planning, building sustainable food, and waste reduction. Before joining Williams, Mike worked for a range of not-for-profits, focusing on everything from youth empowerment to food security and justice. Today, he'll provide an owner's perspective on achieving healthier materials goals. So Charlie, I think you wanted to make a few comments before we get going with our panel discussion today.
Thanks, Lisa. The goal for the session, beyond what Lisa just said, is to find a place for each of you in this movement. Having worked on it for a decade, I want to attest to the fact that it's a movement, though a slow movement, it's one that's really gaining speed. Our hope is that each of you sees an initial step that you can take, and then the way in which you can build upon that initial step to really lend your expertise and your passion to this vital movement. When we look at the ground we've covered, back when we started the Environmental Center at Williams, we were investing 6 or 8 hours per product. We have that now down to 1 to 2, and sometimes as little as 20 minutes per product. We have looked at over 14,000 products cataloged for compliance with Living Building Challenge requirements. And interestingly, we've done this 36,000 or more times when products are repeated from project to project. All this to say that there's a tremendous amount of momentum in this movement, and our hope here is that you develop an even clearer sense of how you can participate directly. Thanks, Lisa.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Mike, I'm going to start with you. The college's Environmental Center was my first LBC project and a deep dive into the Materials Petal. And I know that our experience as a team working to investigate products that complied with the red list or responsible industry, cataloging due diligence when necessary, and then sending the advocacy to manufacturers as LBC requires was really the catalyst for creating Red to Green. For you, how did that initial project translate to today's commitment to multiple LBC projects, exploring volume certification and living community challenge?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So LBC was chosen as the first, as the certification for the class of 1966 Environmental Center because the stakeholders really wanted to push the boundaries of sustainable buildings. The project was challenging because it was one of the first attempting LBC certification, and a historic building from the late 1700s merged with new construction. And it wasn't without its challenges. The building did clarify that bringing an equity lens to building projects, as LBC does, was something that we wanted to continue to do. And it also helped us all to view building materials with the perspective of environmental and human health. And it really started to reorient us to center occupants with our building design. So we moved from pursuing full building certification on the 66 Environmental Center to another LBC project, a Net Zero Energy Residence Hall. And from there, we pursued LBC Petal certification on a subsequent residence hall, and recently embarked on another petal project, both of which have targeted the equity and material petals, as well as health and happiness. So we're working on multiple LBC capital building projects, and we're thinking about how healthy building materials can be brought into our ecosystem through our smaller projects by engaging our trade staff to test healthy products and figure out which ones they like. So we're doing that on the capital level, on the renewal and annual level, and exploring the idea of volume and living communities challenge certification to think about how we do that at scale and across multiple building projects. So it's really exciting.
That's great. I really like how you said it's sort of an ecosystem approach to healthy materials. Lana, you're next. It seems like there are similarities between where you sit as a designer and where Mike works as a sustainability lead for a campus. Where once the imperative to use optimized products takes hold, there's a culture shift that takes place. Can you talk a little bit about how ZGF has organized around 2 sizable LBC projects? How did you make the jump from theory to action?
Thanks, Lisa. ZGF has 2 Living Building Challenge projects in construction right now, and it's really started to change how we approach our work. The first is a headquarters expansion for CalSTRS, the California State Teachers Retirement System in West Sacramento, California. It's 500,000 square feet, so a really big project to be tackling the Living Building Challenge, especially the Materials Petal, which I would still argue is the hardest part of the Living Building Challenge. And the second is the Portland location for PAE Engineering. They are currently in the Bullitt Center in their Seattle office, and they wanted to be in a Living Building Challenge project in Portland as well. So when their lease was coming up, they looked for this opportunity to actually create a Living Building Challenge project in Portland, which will be the first Living Building Challenge project in Portland. And it's really proven to us that the Living Building Challenge is doable. We always saw the Materials Petal as the hardest part of it, and we still feel that way. But we're able to build on the work of others, all the projects that came before us, and the Red to Green platform makes that really achievable, because not only are we building on the work of others, we're building on the work of the others that are doing it at the same time that we are. So it's still a challenge, but it's a challenge that we can get through. There's a system for it, and we can tackle this. And not only can we tackle this, but it's worth it. It's important.
I really love having CGF and the other teams on the platform with us, because it's certainly in the moment where you start to get maybe a little overwhelmed about the work you need to do researching a product. It helps to know that there's this community that is behind the effort, and that collectively we can really achieve more than we could individually. Dustin, as an appreciative guest at Methune's awesome kickoff parties for past Living Future events, I'm so excited to see how the LBC Materials Petal takes shape in the renovated space. I'm interested to hear your perspective as a Materials Petal newcomer. What has been your biggest surprise about the work? And as a follow-up question, are there any myths you'd like to debunk for others who might be ready to take the plunge?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. This is really exciting. Glad to be here. As far as big surprises, I think the biggest surprise that I found is just how little manufacturers know about what goes into their products. I thought going into this that it would be a question of finding the people at the manufacturer who actually knew the information, but it turns out with a lot of manufacturers, they simply don't know what goes into their products, at the transparency level required to approve a product for Red List compliance and, LPC compliance. So that was probably the biggest surprise, and it really highlights the need to push the market forward and to really push manufacturers to know what's in their products and to be able to reply with some, it's not basic information, but it's information that they should know, and it's information that more and more they're going to need to know to be able to sell their products to sustainable projects. So it really underscores the need to push the industry. On the myth busting side of things, it's sort of echoing what Lana said. I think a lot of designers and architects, especially designers and architects who haven't been through the process before, really see the Red List as this giant monster that they should be afraid of, but it's not. You shed some light on it and you realize that it's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to worry about and to build up and to make bigger and heavier because of anxieties. It's just something you have to chip away at, and having the right tools is just an absolute godsend. Having something like a Red to Green where you see the products that are in there, there's a library to choose from, you get some kind of head starts on it, and then to see the knowledge that has been collected over years is just it's a huge bracer to be able to move forward and to not be afraid of it. The other side of MIST, the other side that designers are oftentimes they seem to be afraid of, is that it's overly restrictive. And we have not found that to necessarily be the case. There have been very few instances where we've been forced to use a particular product, and frankly, the Materials Petal certification has pushed us in a different direction, and it's sort of brought new products, superior products, oftentimes into the mix. Things that weren't on our radar before that we wouldn't have learned about otherwise. So, in a lot of ways, it's just made the project better. Aesthetically, obviously, from a healthy material standpoint, and just kind of an all-around better project.
Great. I'm going to ask, because it is a Living Product Expo today, if there are manufacturers out there watching our program, just put in the chat what's been your biggest surprise about the work. If you're somebody who's been working on this since the founding of Living Building Challenge and the Red List, or if you're a new manufacturer to building product transparency and green chemistry, let us know what your experience has been like. Lana, I'm going to turn back to you next. I know that you've been an integral part in the AIA Materials Pledge, and that part of that pledge will ask committed parties to report on how they're doing relative to achieving pledge objectives. to specify healthier materials. Much as Architecture 2030 has provided a reporting structure for addressing operational carbon. I'm wondering if your LBC experience has given you some insight about how we might track progress on a project, and more importantly, build on that achievement in our future work.
Great question, Lisa. Yeah, the AIA Materials Pledge for now, it's a set of aspirational statements saying that a holistically sustainable material supports human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health, and equity in a circular economy. But soon it's going to be a metrics and reporting system. And honestly, right now, we don't keep track of every project that's getting actually installed on the projects that we design. We have a finish legend where we know the products that we care about and hope get installed in the project. We do not have a definitive list of what's going into our projects, except on our 2 Living Building Challenge projects. This is where we actually have that list, not only of what we specified, all the materials we cared about, but what ultimately ended up in the building. And that's the place we really need to get to, where we know what we've been doing and know how we're progressing to show that we're making progress on the Materials Pledge. We're never going to get there unless we start holding ourselves accountable and actually knowing what we're doing now, having that same kind of transparency that we're asking the manufacturers to have with ourselves. So yeah, the Living Building Challenge has really helped us prove that we can do that. It's not a simple thing, but it's something that we're going to increasingly need to do to start meeting our commitment to the Materials Pledge.
That's great. Good to hear that the tool is serving you in that way. So Destin, back to you. I know from my team members who are working with you closely on the Pier 56 project that they really appreciate your willingness to dive into the details of challenging product types and to engage the necessary contractors and manufacturers in the conversations that we all need to have to solve problems around Red List and other imperatives. When you consider project workflow, how do these necessary conversations fit within what's typical? And how do you think these experiences will influence work around healthier materials for Mithun and your project partners in the future?
Yeah, this process has been it's been a pretty steep learning curve for me as a newcomer. I would say the chief lesson that I've learned, or that at least the Red List portion has taught me, is start early. And start early in design, and start early having these conversations with all of your partners, consultants, all the way through to your GC and their subs, frankly, because a lot of times, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of actually procuring a particular material, and understanding what the lead times will be and all of that. And the ability to get ahead of that, I think would smooth out workflow in later phases. We started a little late on our LBC journey in this project, and so schedule has been one of the drivers for us, because we did start as late as we did, and it would have been fantastic to have started earlier. And in future projects, it has to be integrated into just essentially schematic design moving forward, to be able to smooth out the hills and valleys of the workflow down the road. So that would be my recommendation to anybody starting one of these projects.
Super, thank you. So Mike, I'm going to circle back to you now, and to this idea of building on what you already know, both in terms of the scope of impact that your project will have, as well as issues impacted. You mentioned equity earlier. As you know, ILFI has created a number of frameworks for owners, project teams, and manufacturers to engage where you are right now, or where we are right now. And that allows us all to take our experience and then push what's possible, not just for materials, but energy, water, and creating practices and projects that address larger societal concerns. So my question for you is, how do you keep on top of all of these initiatives? And then how do you track the college's improvement using these frameworks, or I guess sort of steer improvement using these frameworks? And maybe it's not using the ILFI frameworks or external certifications, but it might be the college's own sustainability goals. So I wonder if you could talk, sort of looking ahead, how do you use what you know now to move forward?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So up to 2020, the college's sustainability ambitions have been high, but our actual stated commitments have been relatively narrow, focused on CO2 emissions reductions and carbon neutrality. So the college has pursued sustainability on non-energy and emissions areas, but hasn't set goals around them, which means we've made some progress because people in departments across campus care about these issues, but have also experienced backsliding because they oftentimes get deprioritized or lost in the shuffle. Last academic year, Williams, the college, embarked on a college-wide strategic planning process that recognized sustainability as both its own working group, one of 8, and a cross-cutting theme along with DEI. This allowed us to ask the campus community to help identify our sustainability values. So essentially, what issues do we hold dear as a community? And the feedback that we got enabled us to craft a sustainability strategic plan that is ambitious and more comprehensive than our previous goals. We continue to be committed to climate action, of course, but now we have goals around responsible consumption and zero waste, sustainability education, diversity, equity, inclusion as it relates to sustainability, landscaping and land use, and the built environment. And regarding the built environment, we're moving away from a building by building approach to a more holistic approach. And we're expanding our sustainability standards beyond capital building projects to smaller renewal and annual projects. So we're thinking about how we take these successes that we've had on projects and translate that into building habits and cultural change. So in our sustainability strategic plan, we now have in the built environment section a commitment, a recommendation that says reduce the community's exposure to toxins and materials and the maintenance of our physical plant and transparently track the use of high-risk chemicals on campus. So would we have headed that way anyway? Would the campus community have brought that forward anyway? Likely, but I would like to think that our work with the Red List and the Materials Petal helped to drive us there. So up to this point, we've been keeping track of these things on a project by project basis, but now we're really setting long-term goals at a campus level and interim targets along the way.
Mike, I'm just going to tag in on something you bring up there, because I think there's a theme that I see between what you brought up, Lana, which is really aspirational vision, moving all the way through to habit and culture change. And Dustin, you really provide the tie, and that is action. It is action repeatedly that moves us toward those ambitious goals and is the foundation of habits and culture shift. So, for me as a practitioner and partner with a lot of folks on wide-ranging projects, it's really great to hear your insights because it doesn't have to be something that's done in the abstract form. Healthy materials is just something you get up and chip away at. And the act of chipping away at it really moves things quickly.
So my next question is for all of us. When we engage in our first LBC project, I think most of us come through that experience having an altered sense of what integrated design and sustainability are about. And really, we start to understand what regenerative buildings and regenerative products, those goals become more salient to us. And it also makes us more aware of the active role we can and should take to become ambassadors of what's possible. I use that phrase a lot because I think in working with manufacturers every week and engaging with them in the conversation about what can they do to change a product or how they have changed their products to optimize them relative to green chemistry and maybe even embodied carbon. I just wanted you all to reflect on, sort of in the spirit of the title ambassador, what is one thing you really want to share with the Living Product Expo group today to help inspire them to accelerate, or maybe start their healthy materials work?
So I'll jump in, and I mean, I'll just say, in order to start, you got to start. You got to start somewhere, and to not be anxious about the amount of work that it's going to be, to just jump in and get moving on it. Because, like Charlie said, the only way to get through this process is to chip away at it. It's kind of like the children's book. You can't go under it, you can't go over it, you got to go through it. This is very much, you got to go through it, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually kind of fun, and it's a very worthwhile thing to do. So, I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about things and making them a bigger deal than they actually are, and we're often, we suffer more in imagination than reality, Seneca would say. So you just got to jump in there and get after it and chip away at it and be steadfast, and you will get there, and you'll have a fantastic project that'll be just healthier and better.
I think the folks at Isle of Fire are going to be taking that statement of yours. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually kind of fun. I can see that coming out in future promotions for the program. Lana, what about you? What would you share with the group?
Yeah, I would just echo what Dustin and Charlie are saying. I mean, you got to start. You just jump in and you start doing it. But the amazing thing is there are lots of us starting, and there are lots of us doing little bits at a time. We're working with manufacturers, we're working with consultants, we're part of this bigger thing. And so my little chipping away at it, plus Dustin's little chipping away at it, plus Charlie, plus all the other projects that are out there, we're making a difference. We're all part of this collective effort that is transforming the industry, because we can't do it alone. I can't have the red list products that I want if the manufacturers aren't creating them. They're not going to create them if there's not a market for it. So we're all in this together, but together we can do this.
Yeah, Lonnie, you said something really important there, and it's multiple people going at it at the same time. And we've had a couple of products during our short project that were not going to be compliant, but I think multiple projects started asking at the same time, and I think manufacturers said, well, this is obviously going to be a thing, and they pushed forward and they got the transparency and the information that was needed, and that product became compliant. So you're right, it's a team effort, and it's kind of beautiful that we're all working on this together. So it's like all of our work is in each other's projects in some ways. It's I don't know, it's kind of a beautiful thing.
It is. What about you, Mike?
Well, I think in the spirit of team effort, at our college, it is really a team effort. It's thinking about the folks, our project managers who are managing these projects and bringing them along. It's our trades folks who are testing them out and thinking about healthy building materials and durability. It's our design teams, sustainability consultants, and manufacturers who are helping to push us forward. And as I've been reflecting on this, I've gotten to the point thinking about materials, you can't unknow what you know. So when you think about materials being at the intersection of environmental health, human health, and social justice, it's really hard to take that on and then look that in the eye and then step away with it and say, no, that's not for us. Those things really line up with our values. My values, I think the values of the people at the college. And so now we're thinking about, well, how do we take that beyond the building level and think about that in partnership with others and scaling that?
Absolutely. Charlie?
Yeah, Mike, I want to tag on to something you said there. One of the things that I heard a couple of years ago that really resonated with me is that with all of the concerns we have in building, the one piece that truly can't be offset is health impacts. We can think about carbon emissions, we can think about embodied carbon, we can think about water use, and in each case there's an offset or a handprint that can really remedy at a global scale the impacts, the negative impacts that our projects have. That's not true of materials, both at the social equity level and at the health level. So one of the things that I'm consciously doing is trying to balance all of these goals simultaneously, but But if I have to let something go, I try not to let go of the health. And what that often means is simply advocating that we know that we will have imperfect, suboptimal products in every single project. Our hope is that we have fewer as time goes by. But really keeping focus rather on the impact that we have on the lives of individual people is a huge motivator for me.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about the transformation that happens with continued advocacy. I know my first Living Product Expo, I think, was back in 2014, and I can't remember if that was the first year of the event or maybe the second year. And at that time, we were talking about sort of, where it was hard, those product types where it was really hard, those product types where we might have had a few manufacturers who had broken the mold and were doing innovative things that made their products better than similar products. And then there were the products that were easier. And at that time, it was, there weren't a ton of products that were easier because we were in the early days of transparency and optimization. And we used to joke then that you couldn't build an outhouse from the Declare products, right? There weren't enough products on Declare. And now we have hundreds of declared products that offer us everything from finished materials, which we might expect, to heat pumps, which is a welcome addition to the transparency movement. And thinking about how after a number of requests over time, manufacturers who receive our requests, they tend to be the same people, the technical people, or maybe even the marketing person, or if they have a sustainability person, that person. But they take those requests and they pivot and they say to whomever's next in the food chain, we have to do something about this, right? And that is the power of the ask. That is the power, I think, that I love the fact that Red to Green now automates that process for it. I mean, we can all modify our templates and make them our own, but we know who to contact, and we have the language for the ask. And I know recently a lighting manufacturer who I've been working with since that first project at Williams College, Mike, has just finally decided that they're going to declare their product. They've been contacted for every single one of our products and product projects, and possibly many more in the intervening 10 years. And they're in this moment, they're going to get a Declare label. And for me, that just means so much, that moment has arrived. And it's just one of dozens of instances that we can celebrate. And so, I think, Dustin, you were touching upon the fact that in that moment when somebody says to you, okay, well, we can address this. We can remove a finish that's not compliant. We can omit flame retardants. That is a really powerful moment. And then, to Mike's point, we want to do that for all of our clients, whether they're aspiring to achieve the LBC Materials Petal or not.
Yeah, I love that. I remember 5 years ago, I used to talk about when I started seeing exterior materials with transparency that were starting to get rid of the red list. I know we are making progress, and we're seeing that now. Not a ton of them, but we're seeing that now. And you see this cycle where one product, one manufacturer in a category does it, and then the competition will see it and they're like, oh, okay, that's a demand. And then you'll start to see more products doing it. And it's amazing to kind of watch that collective action start to work.
Yeah, I think, Mike, we were talking about this a few weeks ago in preparation for today's event, how the college is located in a fairly remote area, and you tend to work with the same contractors, subcontractors again and again, and you also tend to work with the same suppliers. And you were commenting on sort of the opportunity that exists for Williams College in procurement and in sort of delineating what your hopes are for future building products and projects to work with those local suppliers. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Let me start with, I think it's interesting. It's challenging with contractors. What I hear from project managers, they say, but this is what Williams has always done. And I know these products work. And you're telling me that we need these new products. And so, I mean, what do we learn from that? Change is hard. And how do we clarify our expectations and our goals, both internally and externally, so that everyone can get on board? And then how do we think about, yes, I think I've used the word before, the ecosystem. So there's the college ecosystem, but there's also the surrounding ecosystem. So who are our trade shops buying their products from on a daily basis? And how do we partner with them to think about making sure that there aren't barriers there when they're trying to buy the products, that they can't buy the products that are going to help us achieve those goals? So how do we think about connecting the dots in a way that help us succeed and help all those that we're working with succeed to get to a better place around materials?
Mike, I'm smiling because I remember a conversation you and I and a couple of other on campus had just a few weeks ago, where someone, Derek, said, "We love using Vermont Natural Coatings Polyway." And I smiled because 10 years ago, it was a challenge to get the college to accept Vermont Natural Coatings Polyway as a fully disclosed red list free product to use as a floor finish. And in the interceding 10 years, it's become the norm. And there were a few changes of, cast changes. So Derek hasn't ever known a day when Polyway wasn't the go-to coating. And it just, it's interesting to think about that time scale sort of in both ways, right? It's persisted for years, and that product, which has a well-deserved place in a palette of healthy materials, is the incumbent and will be the incumbent. And on the other hand, it took a long time to tip to that point where it's inevitable. And I think that picks up on what you were saying, Lana, that we're not trying to get the entire market to a tipping point. We're just trying to get each part of the market to the tipping point as quickly as we can. And there are parts that we can get, there are parts that have already tipped, and there are parts that are close to tipping, and there are parts that won't tip for a while. But we don't have to win everything all at once. We can take this sort of piece by piece approach and know that we're optimizing within the existing market and doing so at a pretty rapid clip.
Charlie, I think that's a great point. It's now the norm, right? Polyway, it's accepted and that's what we use. And to your point, how do we make sure that it happens more quickly? Or thinking about it sort of internal college workings, how do we get buy-in and make sure that we are incorporating the feedback from the trades folks so that they are involved with making those decisions? But that happens on a time frame that's quicker than 10 years.
One of the things that I have been thinking about a lot in preparation for this discussion is sort of who, what, where, why, when, how. And if we're talking about healthy materials, there's a place for everyone. It should be included on every project starting now. And then the why feels quite settled. I don't think we need to have conversations about the benefits of avoiding carcinogens or bioaccumulative toxins or endocrine disruptors. That science is settled. That's not a new idea to most. And to your point earlier, Mike, it's intuitive. Even if someone hears that for the first time, hey, let's build a building without carcinogens, they don't have to stop and wonder whether that's a good idea. It breaks down, the sort of why not is really a function of how. And some of that, to your point, Dustin, is fear. I don't know how to do it, so I'm afraid of the effort and the cost and the risk of failure. We combat the why not answer with a clear process. And with these shared stories, both at the aggregate level, we can talk about all of those product types we've tipped. And then at the individual story level, we can talk about the successes we have on a person-to-person, project-to-project, manufacturer-to-manufacturer basis. And there's really a place for everyone in this movement. And that's what it's going to take to turn the why nots into whys as we move forward. Thanks, Lana, Dustin, Mike, Lisa, for joining me today to talk about healthier materials. This is the middle of a conversation, I would say. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with each of you. And for those of you listening in today, if we haven't had a chance to answer your questions in the chat, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. This is a topic near and dear to us, and it's really a movement in which each of you is an essential piece. And I'm sure that as you reflect upon this, you'll have questions about your specific role, some of which will be technical in nature, some of which will be philosophical in nature. We recognize that all of those questions need to be voiced and answered by the community in order for you each to feel welcome and empowered to participate. So if we are incredibly grateful to ILFI for the Living Building Challenge and for the framework that really requires us to be active participants in this rather than passive consumers of health and material information. I think the fact that there's an active role for each of us is essential, and each of us isn't limited to consultants and designers and construction team members. It's manufacturers, it's building occupants, and it's owners. So I think each one of us can set a small goal, and together we move the entire process toward the end goal that we want, that aspirational end state of healthy materials and equitable materials for all. So again, I'm grateful for this opportunity and for each of you, your thoughts and your time and your accumulated wisdom. And I look forward to connecting with everyone as time goes on. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.